Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some potential history. This time, the best tank of World War II. Now, before we get into the video and before my prediction for what is going to be said here, make sure you go check out the links in my description box or in my pinned comment in the comment section below, where I have a link to my Twitch channel where I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Fridays, and Saturdays from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time. And then I also have a link to my gaming channel here on YouTube where I'm just uploading old stream VODs. Too. So, yeah, that's that. Now, best tank of World War II. Now, the American in me wants to say Sherman because of its. It certainly had issues. Every tank of World War II has a lot of issues. However, I think because of the amount that it was able to be produced, it's still functional capabilities, still rather effective, serving as a tank, right? I think that perhaps bumps it up. I'm not gonna. I don't want to say any of the German tanks, just because of they were good. However, we know, are they really that good when the production was never streamlined for the German tank? Now, of course, then there's the legendary Bob Semple tank. That thing's a fucking beast. You know what? Say Bob Semple. Bob Semple tank. I don't think anything is Bob Semple. Go ahead and dive in. Out of curiosity, what do you guys think is the best of World War
II? T-34. Panther G.
Okay,
It ticks
It's all about guys.
all the boxes regards
M4
armor
Sherman.
protection,
The
mobility,
Tiger one
and
has
firepower.
been
Never
individual
had no
tanks that
combat
cost no matter
reliability,
where
so
the
they
guys
are
going
great.
around
And
the
half
corner.
still
Rotating
exist
Tigers
today
use
at
tech
Toke
for
6
me.
Shimmer.
Panther
That's
was
why I
basically
think
one
because
down
they
here
were
with
one
cheap
tighter,
down
because
and
hands
down
are
down
difficult.
reliability
They
cost.
do not like a Russian. If they had T-34 with best not the Tiger and all that.
Here it is, the terrible question that has plagued World War II message boards for years and probably for years to come.
It'll never end. It'll never end. It probably won't end until there is another world war. Let's be real. I don't. And even after that, I don't think it'll end. I don't.
Unfortunately, due to a slight setback in the video I was going to release today, we're going to answer this question. What was the best tank of the war? And I want to die. Now, there are a few layers
Same. Same.
to this question, but the first few that people always usually flock to are statistics on paper. Gun penetration, armor thickness, things like that. And because of that, a lot of people put the Panther on the pedestal for the best tank of the war. And don't get me wrong, it is a very impressive tank. Its long 75mm gun was extremely deadly at very long ranges, and it had really good armor that was pretty tough to get around. In fact, all third-generation German tanks pretty much had these awesome features, a good gun and good armor. Once you start looking at them from a second point of view, say a production standpoint, they start to not look so good. Because the Germans couldn't produce that many of their tanks because they were so complicated and because of German production methods. If looking from the production point of view, you could look at tanks like T-34 or the Sherman. The T-34 was created in eye-watering amounts and was perfect for a large war of attrition like World War II. On top of this, it did have a pretty decent gun and pretty decent armor for most of its life, including the 76 and 85mm versions. But then perhaps you're looking at your best tank from the point of view of crew survivability, which is something that the T-34, at least in my opinion, didn't really have. I mean, look at that bow gunner's position. You don't even have a hatch, you just have that tiny thing on the floor. That's like the worst scenario for if the tank is on fire. And with that in mind, you gotta look at tanks like the M4 Sherman, which had individual spring-loaded hatches for 4 of the 5 crewmen in the tank, and was one of the most survivable tanks of the war. In fact, the Sherman ticks a lot of these boxes here that we've been talking about previously. It was easy to mass produce, it was a fairly capable vehicle, and was able to be used on all fronts, from the steppes of Russia to the jungles of Southeast Asia. In fact, it's been really—
Did I get it? Did I get it right? No, there's still too much video left. I did not get it right.
really nice to see the Sherman's reputation revamped by historians in recent years after the tarnishing it took from the book that shall not be named. But even this tank did have its shortcomings. Its small-wheeled bogie suspension would not allow it to have the same cross-country, obstacle-clearing potential as, say, T-34 or Panther with their large road wheel design, and its performance was somewhat lackluster at times at the end of the war against bigger German tanks. So even it, I would say, isn't the best tank of the war because it also falls prey to some of these problems.
Damn it.
But then what about Japanese tanks? And I know what you gotta be thinking if I'm mentioning Japanese tanks in a World War II best tank competition. You gotta be thinking,
Johnny is a fucking retard.
but Japanese tanks in the 30s against the Chinese force with little to no tanks did a very good job of supporting the infantry, and the mechanized infantry, the exact thing they were supposed to be doing. It's only later on when they run into American tanks that they, well, do this. Quite often, actually, because they were outdated at that point and the Sherman was just so much better. But also, talking about Japanese tanks in this way kind of misses the point entirely. Japan was going to beat the United States with its navy, because they were a naval power, and because they were fighting in the South Pacific. Creating larger tanks to fight on small islands in the South Pacific in battles that probably would have been sorted out by the infantry anyways, wasn't going to help the large Japanese strategic plan of defeating the US Navy, which is what they needed to do for the war they found themselves in.
Fair.
So I guess what I'm building to here, looking at design, tactics, and grand strategy, is there was no best tank of the war.
Now, you can't just do that potential history. You gotta give us an answer.
And every country was building tanks to fill its needs. Was the Panther maybe the best tank for the German army? Yeah, I think so. It really kept up with the tank arms race they had going with the Soviet Union. But would it be the best tank for the United States? No. It broke down a lot. It's way too heavy and couldn't be shipped to all the theaters, and it couldn't be made in the numbers that the US Army needed. But would the M4 have been the best tank for, say, the Japanese? I don't think so. They needed small infantry support tanks that could be taken to various Pacific islands very quickly. And sometimes even, at places like Iwo Jima and Tarawa, the Japanese tanks would sort of outperform the American tanks in maneuverability because the American tanks would get bogged down in the sand due to their weight, and the light Japanese tanks could move freely. So you could make the argument that although the Ha-Go was not a very good tank all around, it was probably the best tank for the Japanese forces at the time. And you can say the same about the T-34. I've already made a video on this, but the T-34 was made cheaply and very quickly. So yeah, it broke down, and yeah, a lot of them got destroyed, but it was made with the idea of an attritional war in mind. So that's exactly what suited the Soviets. Even Italian tanks, for as much grief as they get, were designed by the Italians.
I mean, how much of that can you really call it? Tank though, that looked
with their needs in mind. They thought they were going to be fighting in the mountains. I mean, the first place they attack is Greece.
They know.
So they make small infantry support tanks that can maneuver in the mountains and not break down there. Now, when these tanks are used in the desert in North Africa, of course they do poorly, because that's not what they were designed for. And this leads in part to their bad reputation. I think the most solid case for best tank of the war would probably be M4 Sherman, just due to the fact that it was used everywhere, from the steppes of Russia to the jungles of Southeast Asia. It did its job and it did it well. But I still think this question can't be singularly answered with one tank. It's way too big of a question and there's too many variables, and I don't think it has an answer. But I know what you're thinking. You clicked on this video for a clickbaity title, and you really wanted my impression of what the greatest tank of the war is. So, if I had to pick one, it would be the Bob Semple tank. This ingenious design would have caused destruction.
God, it's so beautiful. Oh God. Make sure you have tissues on hand, ladies and gentlemen. This tank. Oh. Oh. Oh man.
On the battlefield in ways that we can't even fathom. If only the New Zealanders had had the balls to put it into service.
Oh. Beautiful. Oh, the Bob Semple makes me cry. It's so beautiful. Tank. So that was the best tank of World War II. Bob Semple. By potential history. I hope you guys enjoy. I don't have any. Yeah. He did the typical potential history thing where he took the question, kind of flipped it on its head, and made an argument for why you can't really answer this question, because obviously it is different for every single participant of the war. Which technically, yeah, he's right. He's fucking right. However, of course, if we had to look at from, I would say, a statistics standpoint, then we just look at numerically with ease of production, ease of shipment, like how effective is this tank able to be effective in a number of scenarios? Is this tank still an effective tank? Perhaps not technically the best tank for armor or for gun, but is it able to fit with those two previous sections and still maintain its status as, like, I guess, a tank? Still be, tanky effective, right? Purpose. I think based off of those, I think the M4 Sherman does fit those the best out of any of the other. I mean, certainly perhaps if the Germans had decided to, streamline their production a bit more, perhaps we would be saying it's a German tank that is the best tank of World War II. But they never streamlined their production line. We've seen multiple times, especially from potential history, talking about German production. They never, put in the effort to streamline it. They just kept, like, adding different modifiers to a tank each time it hit the production line, which does not streamline the process. Right. So the two contenders, I would say, then would be the Sherman and the T-34. However, the T-34, as he mentioned, broke down a lot. So it might have the better gun and perhaps maybe even slightly better armor or very similar armor to Sherman. It breaks down way too much, which adds in its cost. The thing breaks down a lot. That's going to make it cost. Now, of course, it's cheap. That's why. So they make it cheap. It breaks down a lot so that if it breaks down, you can replace it easily with a new one, right? That's a bit of a waste because that's still using up production time. Instead, you could just make a tank, have a tank be built from the beginning that is still reliable, won't break down as often. That way you don't have to then waste a tank coming off of the production line to refill a position now missing because one tank broke down or whatever. So I think, based off those statistics, I think the Sherman does win. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. And make sure to comment if you agree, if it's the Sherman or Bob Semple or whatever. Let me know what you think the best tank of World War II is, fitting those requirements, or make an argument as to why perhaps the best tank of World War II doesn't need to fit those requirements or whatever. Just make a good argument. Let me read. Give me something to read. Yeah. See ya. Peace.